Well, good afternoon. Today, I'm going to make this is hopefully it'll turn out to be a nice little point story video. My wife's got some big jars that she uses for making natural pine cleaner and stuff like that. Well, one of the jars actually broke, so I kept the bottom off of it. So this bottom's probably about 3/8 of an inch thick. Um, we'll see if we can get something nice out of it. It's got a big dish here, so what we're gonna do first is we're gonna work this dish out, because that's gonna determine the size of the point. So um, we're probably gonna end up with a point that's what, 3.5 inches long, if all works out. So on that note, we will start working this piece down. And I cleaned the edges up before I started, so now I'll start working these edges in. So I'm going to start shooting all my flakes in this way, trying to just run short flakes to get, because this is dipped. It's got a, for the edge of the jar where it's sat on stuff, so it's got that dip. So we got to get rid of that, and then it's going to work this edge up into here, and then that'll allow us to shoot flakes and get this nice and concave, or convex, sorry. And then just like this side, and then once we got this side, then we'll shoot the flakes across this side to make all the scar patterns and the flake patterns. So on that note, let's start. See, that nice, all the ridges part, I just popped all that off. So we're just gonna walk around it doing that. You don't want to strike it very hard either, right, when you're doing it, because it's real easy to, one wrong hit and I could break this piece in multiple pieces. So when I go, I'll show you in a sec here, it's once we go all the way around this piece. So I basically took all the edges where you can see there's a few there, the little lines. Now what I'm going to do is I want to, because I'm trying to work this edge, I'm going to braid everything down, which is going to bring my edge back up, so that when I flip it over, my edge is low and I can take more shots off it. Big thing, don't be afraid to braid. Lots of people, they don't abrade it. In my opinion, they don't abrade it enough. And if your platform's not strong enough, when you hit it, it just crushes and it could cause a problem. Not initially, but if it happens when you're closer to making your finished piece, you can get a whole bunch of stacks. And then you got to try to get under the stacks. And then if you can't pressure flake them off, then you try to do it with a bopper, and you can actually, I've snapped really nice points, like snapped them right in half, because you build your shoulder, build your platform, and you go to strike it, and either you don't support it properly and it breaks, or what ends up happening is there's too much material that you're trying to take off at one shot, or you've hit it just with too much pressure that it can't, the force that you struck it with has no place to go, and it just causes the piece to break. You can see when I'm hitting it, you can see sometimes where the flake goes. See, that flake came from this edge and it came all the way into this raised part, which is right underneath where they got the the bottle and their mold number or whatever that is there. So the flakes are starting to shoot in a little bit farther as I go around now. Oh, that flake. I tapped it there, took that whole chunk out right there. That's pretty decent. You can see that there. So I struck it there, and you can see that whole piece of flake came on. You can see through the top. I will do the same thing. Braid it again. I'm braiding down to lift this edge back up so that, because I'm still nowhere near making that flat, you can still see it dishes in here, probably 1/4 of an inch still. We got lots of material. This is over 3/8 of an inch thick in the middle, so we'll just keep working it. Again, you're not hauling off and really whacking it. We're just working it to drive the flakes in. Just, we don't want to take too much off at one point in time. See, we're working into this so they get rid of that outside ring. We got rid of most of it here, but we still got lots here that has to get worked in this way. So that's what we're in the process of doing right now. So we're around the flake, almost right to the edge of this clear spot in the middle of the concave bottom. So we're gonna work this edge in, and then we'll probably work this edge in, and then we'll keep that as our length, and we'll just keep working it like that. Basically what I'm doing there is I was just moving that edge up quicker than if I braid it. Yeah, I'm gonna have to make it a little bit. I have to probably work the ends in. So we're only probably gonna end up with and hopefully we'll end up with like a 3.5 inch point out of that. So that'll put it to there. So that's what our goal is right now, and then we'll work the ends in. We'll probably make a nice little, I might make a nice little blade out of that. I'd like to have some tunes playing, but as soon as there's music playing, then YouTube makes it a restricted video and you don't get as many views. See, if you look at that, so you got a low right there, and I got a low right there. So I'm going to strike this one, and then I'm going to strike this one, and then I'm going to have a look and see how it goes. So you can still see we've got about 3/16 of an inch in the middle right here where you can see my thumb in the background. So we still have to shorten it up and dry flakes in this way and this way to get rid of that in the middle. Sometimes when you're working bottle bottoms or jar bottoms like this, if they're not thick enough, you have to keep working them in and working them in so small, like all of a sudden you might only get like an inch and a half point out of it because the bottle bottom, like, do I have there's a little beer bottle bottom that's going to run into the same problem. You can see it's domed up, but it's probably, that one's got like 3/8 of an inch underneath that. So by the time you bring those edges in, you're only going to get a really tiny point out of that. So you got to be mindful when you're using bottle bottoms. You want to try to use a bottle bottom that's either really thick so that you have room when you thin it, or something that doesn't have as much concavity on the one side. Fortunately, up here in Canada, we don't get the blue Budweiser bottles. I've seen some guys make some really nice points out of them. So we got about 1/16 of an inch until we're flat, and then we got to worry about, we still have to drop this edge down, make this side convex like this side. It probably won't be as far across the top or as convex, but then this will run flakes real easy. So what we're trying to do is get this side to the point where we're sort of happy with it, and then we'll go back and work this side, and then we'll come back and finish this side so that it all matches up. See, I don't know if you can see it. Maybe you can see it better this way. See where the end of my finger is? When I tap that, that flake shot almost all the way into the middle of this piece, maybe 3/8 of an inch from the middle. So now we're going to start working our flakes in this way, trying to get this all done out so it's got the nice little convex thing, and then we'll flip it over and then we'll start pushing our flakes this way. Let's check this. See how we're working on our flat spot here. We have a 1/16 of an inch in the middle so we still have to shoot flakes in this way. So I'll have to bring that edge back up, abrade the crap out of it, make it stronger. See if I can drive some flakes in this way before I start bringing the sides in, because if I bring the sides in too fast, what ends up happening is this piece gets too thin, and when you drive the flake this way, it just snaps right here in the middle. So always figure out what's going to be your ends, and then once you got your ends figured out, so I'm going to make this my point and probably this piece my base right here, or the other way around, vice versa, depending on which way it works better. Because if you're having problems at one end and you're not having it at the other, so like say this end here works out good, so we'll make that the base. And if we're having problems here, as we thin that out to make that the tip, then the piece becomes smaller and smaller, and it's easier to work out the imperfections that you're running in your piece. Only got that little triangle in there now that I'm trying to work out. I'm trying to get flakes into there. So as we'll start making the sides in, we might get a nice decent Schneiders out of this. If we want to make a larger point, we'll see how it works. And when I'm doing that, I'm just nibbling away at this edge, moving it in, changing the angle, and then I'll abrade it. And then once I got it abraded, then I will try to run my flakes in again once the edges are strong. So I want to try to, I don't know if you can see that right there. So I'm going to want to try to drive this low point right here. I want to try to take a big chunk of this out with it. So, but I got to make sure I support it right, or if I hit it too hard, I can snap my piece. little bit, it took a little bit, hit a little bit high, but I drove the flake almost out to the middle here. So now I'll see if I can come in with this one and run this ridge line up and in. See, there's part of the flake that I knocked off. That was a nice one too. Shot it in, so now I've only got like 3/4 of an inch there by almost an inch here. And then that will be cleared out. So we'll bring these edges in. Well, basically flat. So now we're gonna we're gonna work the edges in, try to run the flakes in a little bit farther to make it more concave, or convex, sorry. And then once that's done, then I'll start running my flakes going this way. I'll probably just pressure flake these ones, but we'll see how it goes. Oh, I might have just cracked it. See that one right there? I don't know if you can see it. You can see that right there. There's a perfect crack there. It didn't. So I might have just shot myself in the foot here. Well, it didn't crack it, thank God. Well, that's a good thing. But I'll keep an eye on that because that might end up biting me in the butt. least all the way to there, you can see that the line, that flake isn't coming off, so it's still attached somewhere. So I'll have to, so we can shoot some in from the other sides to pop this chunk off. Got a little bit of the indent there. I didn't see that when I started working it, but we'll work through it, guys. And that's what I didn't want to happen. We just broke it. But if you can see, look at the thickness. We're down to 1/4 inch all along. So we'll get 2 points out of this, hopefully. So I'll zigzag this one and we'll go continue working on the bigger piece, and that's what I'll hopefully get the video out of. And let's see what we got for thickness here. Actually less than 1/4 inch already. So there we go. One piece popped off. There we go. Just got to zigzag this edge here. So I'll switch to pressure flaking and we'll zigzag the edge. Sometimes all the best intentions of the world when you're hoping to get as large a piece as you can, and then the piece might have had a flaw that you didn't see. In that case, when I split this piece in half by accident, actually hit a little bit higher than I wanted to hit on the edge to try to drive my flake in, and when that happened, it decided to tell me that it didn't appreciate that. So but they say when you're flint knapping, if you ain't making, you ain't breaking. So I'm leaking already. See that little spot of my blood on the, that happens. Lots of people would now they would switch to your Ishi stick, and they would start try to drive in thinning flakes or driving flakes across. It's a lot easier to do. You build a lot more power with the Ishi stick. But I also found that I personally was becoming way too dependent on it. So I started thinning everything I could as best I could with just indirect percussion, or direct percussion, sorry, and pressure flaking. And I worked at getting to my points about probably average between 3/16 and a 1/4 inch thick that way. Don't get me wrong, I broke a buttload, because that is going to happen no matter how you look at it. So I got that piece right there. So I'll have to bring this edge in a little more, and then I can get this big stack that I was trying to remove when I hit it broke the other way, because I was working this edge, that's where I drove the flake through, and then I was trying to move it when I struck it this way. I was trying to run my flakes this way to remove the stack, and that's how come it broke along this edge. Not quite. Let's see. Right between my two fingers, right there, that's the 1/4 inch, and you can see if we take that stack out of there, that's almost 3/32 of an inch on that stack. So that's what I'm trying to work out of it. So now what I'm going to try to do is to braid the crap out of this edge. So now what I want to do is I'm going to grab my one Ishi stick here, and I'm going to pressure flake this edge. What I'm trying to do is catch it a little high, and I want to drive it underneath this stack where I got to keep bringing the piece in. So let's give her a try. Oh, there we go. Ran it right off the edge of the stack, but it didn't remove it. Removed a little bit, but there you go. One more over here. There we go. The stack is gone. It's because it's slipping off the edge. I don't want it to slip. And to get your flakes to run farther, you want to push, when you're pushing in, you're pushing in and down, because you want that edge to load up, and then you want to pop that flake off. So when you start pressing down and you get to that point where the flake releases, all the energy is shot down the edge of that flake and makes it run farther across your piece. it bite. So when you're working your piece, when you're pressure flaking it, when you're starting to finish your flakes, like I'm not good, I'll be honest, I'm not very good at lining my pressure flakes up. Like some of the flint knappers out there are like out of this world when it comes to it. I haven't quite figured out how to do that yet. So mine's normally mismatched flake scars when I do it. There's other, like I said, there's other guys that, man, everything's perfect. Maybe one day I'll be that good, but I just keep working away. If you look at I've got a couple of actual points that were given to me. And they are not symmetrical. The notches are out. I mean, they just needed something that was functional when they were flint knapping. They didn't need something that was perfect. Could they do the perfect job? Absolutely. They were excellent flint knappers back then. They just never had the time because you were either being hunted by somebody or you were hunting. So you didn't have all that time to sit around and worry about that your points were perfect. But like I said, it's not to say that they couldn't make their points that way. They just didn't have to spend all their time making their points that way. And when it comes to working with glass, the native peoples, when the Europeans came out, figured out pretty quick that glass was knappable. They used to steal the insulators off beside the railroad tracks, and they used to make their points out of their points out of those. The Aborigines in Australia got so bad with taking the insulators that the Australian government used to leave cases underneath the telephone or the telegraph poles just so that they would stop taking the telegraph pole stuff. I just actually had a bunch of insulators given to me from a gentleman in Spence's Bridge, so I'm going to make a video on busting an insulator apart and seeing what I can get out of it. Whether it's a lot, we shall see. Another friend of mine, Cody, he did one. He got about a half a dozen decent sized points out of it. So hopefully I'll be able to duplicate his success. Maybe not the first time, because you got to figure out how to open them up. That's what we're looking at now. So what do we got? We have a point that is well, by the time we're set, it's 2 3/8 now, but by the time we finish, it'll probably be 2 1/4, and we'll probably be 1 1/8 when we're done. So it'll be 2 1/4 by 1 1/8, and I think I'm gonna make I'm gonna try to make a Sauvi's Island out of it. That's my favorite style point. It comes from a place in Washington, just across the U.S. border from British Columbia, where I live. So I just like the way they look. They're pretty cool. It's a stemmed point with a couple little barbs off the back. So you could use the same, if you were making blanks, you could use the same blank to make the northern side notch, because the northern side notch is basically the same thing, except just the one notch here and the one notch there. And you want to, that's what you want to hear when you're pressure flaking. You want to hear that little pop. You don't want to hear it crunch. If you hear, where's that other piece? If you hear that difference, so that what you want to hear is the pop. You don't want to hear the crunch. So I'm trying to make the crunch sound now for you. Hear that crunch? And then you get the little pop. Well, that crunch means that your shoulder you didn't have a strong enough platform. And because you didn't have a strong enough platform, what ended up happening was the platform stalled out. So all right. So now we'll finish this point up. Ow. Hurt my back the other day. It's really starting to bite me in the ass, if you don't mind me saying so. Especially when you're working around the tip, you want to be really, really careful. I don't know how many times I went to work my tip and I've broken like a 1/4 inch off of it, just because I got a little, instead of just stopping and making sure I had a nice shoulder or a nice platform, I would just, stick my notching tool slash finishing tool in. And what ends up happening is you put a little bit too much pressure. Yeah, it's on the right shoulder, but when the release happens, it just snaps off that little bit of the tip because there's no support for it. All right, when you're doing this part, yeah, don't be afraid to set up your platforms a little more than you normally would. Because all that ends up happening is if you try to push it, you end up with a tip that's now, instead of 2 3/8 of an inch, would be 2 inches, because you have to shorten 3/8 off the end just to make it nice. And if you want to make it symmetrical, then you got to take a little bit off the width, or just make a new style point, period. Either way it happens. Especially the Sauvie's Island, you don't want to bust this little corner off, because that's what the corner here and the corner here are what makes the little piece for the barb. And it's really easy to bust one of those off, especially when you're working the edges. And you're left standing there going, oh crap. So now, I draw my notches out just because I've had it where I think the notches, this is where the notch is going to go, and then I do it, and then all of a sudden it's like, crap, I'm out. It doesn't look proper. So Sauvie's Island is a small stemmed point. So there's a short stem on it, and I'll show you what it's going to look like here after I draw on it. That's what it's going to look like. You can see so those black lines will be taken off of it as I notch it. So we'll do the notching, and then we should be done. We'll actually have a Sauvie's Island out of a bottle bottom. It's not what we actually wanted originally, but so the little crunching sound you hear in there, that's what you don't want to hear when you're actually notching it, or when you're actually working on the piece. You get all kinds of little things that are going to come up and bite your hand when you're doing this, so make sure you dump your, you can see the little, that's a perfect little cone of percussion that notched out of there. Try not to drop them on the ground because they have a tendency to break. Thankfully, it did not break when I dropped it. A couple of the guys, when I first started, they told me to just throw some old rugs down. So when my wife decided the bathroom carpets needed to be redone, I grabbed both the bathroom carpets that were in front of the tub in the shower and I threw them down on the ground here so that wouldn't have the issue of, so now I've only, don't get me wrong, you still break the points, but now when they fall onto the carpet and a little bit of debutage that's sitting on top of the carpet, so you don't have to. I should say that. I always worry when I drop them, but you shouldn't have to worry as much. You have a little bit more. A little bit more deep. Again, as I'm getting closer to the edge where the little bar would be, I'm really making sure not to press too hard because I don't want to snap that whole corner off. I'm a little bit out of symmetry. There we go. One last notch and then I'll touch the edge up and this one will be good. There you guys go. Nice little Salvies Island out of that big bottle bottom that broke. And so there you go. hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you want a video on anything different or any other types of points, I'll see if I can make you one. I have a gentleman that wants me to make him a 6 or a 7-inch blade. I'm going to see if I can make a video on that. I just got to scrounge the material up and run it through my saw, just because I don't want to spall out the whole piece. I want to save some material, so I'll get that done. Hopefully I'll get that one on video for you guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Have a good day.